The media and politicians and universities are three separate situations, so we do present to all of them. There hasn't been, I want to go to the federal level, there has not been a congressional hearing on cell phone and wireless radiation since 2008 and 2009, and at that time, Dr. Davis presented, as well as several other eminent scientists. You can go online and watch the presentations. What came out of that is the call for a review of the limits by the Government Accountability Office. But then the FCC is captured by agency and is saying there's no problem. So there's work, when word gets out and they hear the information from the scientists, we find that there is action that's taken. At the 5G New Hampshire Commission on 5G, they are listening to the scientists. We presented to Colorado and cities in California, to the Mexico Telecom Authority. When India, the government of India, decided to look at this, they had an interministerial group come together to look at the impact to birds and bees, and they actually made their radiation limits far more protective. They dropped them to 1/10 of what they were before. But they have to have that information, and there has to be a process where they're looking at that information. So for example, we're calling for a congressional hearing. If there's something you can do today, I have an idea of many, but contact your elected officials, show them the letters that have been written by members of Congress who've been presented with this information, and call for a congressional hearing on this issue where the scientists can present the science and the policymakers can hear it. That's one thing. Now, when we talk to the media, I'm going to tell you that we're challenged because they don't have much of an attention span, and they want to hear it really quick, and then they get on the phone and they talk to industry-funded scientists who say there's no problem. And we work really hard, and there have been several pieces that have come out where we have been talking to the reporters. There's a piece coming out soon that I hope it's coming out very soon, really giving them the background. When you have an investigative reporter, they take the time to understand the issue, to look at who they're speaking to and who's funding them. I mean, this is, it's quite a challenge, but it's happening. You can look at The Nation did a report on this. We have several, which we have up on our website, of investigative reports that have been done looking at this issue. But we really need to get to the federal level. At the state level, things are happening. I mean, Vermont, New Hampshire, Oregon just passed a bill to review the effects of radio frequency and wireless in schools, with a focus on schools. So that happened by being presented the information. There has to be space to do that. There has to be a forum to present the information so that they can receive it. And we often get shut down because, you know, you can send a million emails, they're not going to read them. There needs to be an official meeting where people have time to speak, not just 3 minutes. We've been doing Zoom, so if you're listening to this and go to your city council, we will do presentations to governments and to counties. Absolutely.
Okay.
So.
And regarding 5G, if there was a tsunami, you have like minutes to get out of the way before the tidal wave comes over. How much time do we have to reverse this? Like if we think about this for, like, let's say 10 years, and then realize it's a big deal, is that a reasonable strategy? Or are you saying that if that they're immediately building out the network, and if we don't do something in the next week, month, year, 2 years, like how much time, a lot of these people are hearing it for the first time, they didn't realize it was this urgent. How much time do we have to deal with this before it becomes undealable because the whole country is surrounded with these small cells? So how much time do we have so everyone here knows whether this is at the top of their list, the middle of their list, the bottom? Like, how much time?
Not much. Actually, I want to respond to what Theodora was saying. A friend of mine was on a line recently having lunch. He bumped into Kennedy Jr., who happens to...
Talking to the mic.
He happens to be concerned about kids My friend explained the problem with what's going on in the FCC. And rather than appeal to the governance body, he's suing the government's body.
We are too with him. Yeah.
What he did was, he said the standards that in December 17th that you decided not to address was flagrant incompetence on their part. And what he said is the standards that are thermally based are totally inadequate because everything science knows today is biological. So how we're going to win? Take them to court.
I think that's the point I'm making, how we're stopping smart meters, is when this lien comes out, it's going to go public in a big way, and all these agencies and governments and corporations are going to actually be under, not in the courts now. A lien is something a little outside the court, it's more powerful.
Nobody listened to Theodora a year or two ago because it wasn't that important and imperative to resolve the problems. But all of a sudden, there's a groundswell of interest, and that interest is really helping to bring to the surface the importance of us taking action and pushing our governance bodies at every level and suing them if you have to.
So I have a little question. How do I get those letters you're talking about? On your website?
We
Is there a way
have
of listing
a
that?
section on, if you click on the 5G section.
Go to the website itself.
Oh, yeah, you go to the website, you hover over key issues. You'll see 5G on the drop-down, so you're...
What is the website?
Oh, I'm sorry, it's Environmental Health Trust, ehtrust.org. And we have a page with scientists' letters on 5G, and what we've tried to do is have a compendium every time with right now we just added from Guernsey, where Dr. Davis just traveled and presented to this country. And then they have letters from several scientists. So every time a scientist writes a letter to a country, compiling the science, distilling it down, and saying why that policymaker should do something, we try to collect them and have a place for them. So if you're in your town, you can say, look at this was just written to here. Look at what this scientist is saying. We should be listening to this too. Listen to the scientists. I want to add too, so I think that we do need to have action at every level. At the local, which is where we really have to be working to raise awareness, at the city, the state, and at the federal level. But lawsuits are an important component, and most issues around environmental pollution are ultimately, it's the lawsuit and in court where we end up moving things along. So we are also suing the FCC for the same reason. We believe there will be other groups that are working together on this, because what the FCC did in December, and I talked about it but just briefly, is they said, we've looked at all these submissions by scientists. There are over 1,000 submissions by scientists and people all over writing our federal government saying you need to update your outdated limits. And they said, oh, we looked at it and there's really nothing in there that shows there's a problem. And why? Well, because the FDA says they're basing this on the FDA. Now, the FDA is rejecting the NIH research, and there's literally, I'm not kidding, there's one paragraph in an FDA letter saying, well, we don't think that there's much science showing harm. And is it okay to make a decision based on one paragraph? Without any scientific citations, this is unacceptable. I mean, our children deserve more than this. So that's happening. And there already was a court case that was won on 5G regarding environmental review. The FCC passed regulations that said that their small cells, their 5G infrastructure, oh, it's so small, it doesn't need environmental review. We can just bypass that law. And several Indian tribes sued, as well as Ed Myers, who's one of our lawyers who's working on this new court case, and NRDC, and we won that. Every cell tower, and this is something to think about, so every cell tower that has gone up in the last about year, that didn't have an environmental review, every small cell, it needs to be certified as meeting the regulations we have around environmental review. And there's more of that on our site that we're going to be putting up, and you can learn more about that. But there's a lot of work in the legal front that has to be done, and that's happening.
Theodora,
So-
tell them about Italy.
Oh, the court case, the Supreme Court?
Yes,
So
the second iteration of that, the last,
the confirmation
right, the
of
confirmation of the business.
So there's also several cases where people have used cell phones for long term, they've developed tumors, and in Italy, there's several court cases where the judge determined, including with the Supreme Court of Italy, that the tumor was related to the cell phone. And this was just it was an appeal, and the telecom lost. And so.
Tell them what the judge said.
Oh, the judge said that, talked about not looking at industry-funded science because
Right.
there was so much.
And he couldn't trust the service providers' data.
Right. And they really only didn't allow industry-funded information to be a part of that decision. And when you remove industry influence from the science, the majority of the research shows effects. So.
So this is also, working with this group using liens, which kind of,
Explain, they probably don't know what it is.
so lien basically says if you don't, here's a problem, if you don't clear it up, you're going to have to pay $10,000 or $25,000 a day. It bypasses the court system, and then they've had some definitely victories on the East Coast regarding smart meters using that approach. Now, that document is very close to being out, and all I can say is, hopefully in a month, go to drcousens.com, and we'll have that information, and you can do it. You don't need a lawyer to do it. It's not going to cost money both ways, and it seems to be more powerful than actually getting winning a suit, believe it or not. So that's one thing to really consider. So drcousens.com, hopefully in a month we'll have what I need to have that up. This is a very, very powerful way of going, which is, I said, defeating the smart meters, which is a really big deal.
Before we go to the next question, I think it's appropriate for everyone here in Long Island, as well as everyone listening now, live, and in the future. I wanted to be very clear that you're not alone. So concisely give your website.
Oh,
Yeah.
ehtrust.org.
ehtrust.org. You don't
Yeah.
have to invent the wheel. Dr. Davis created this organization. She in the United States basically is the kingpin of this. Get a hold of them.
There's several scientific organizations,
Okay.
of which we are one of the leading organizations working on this, I would say. So it's ehtrust.org, and I have a lot of materials here. And if you go to ehtrust.org/trust, you can sign up for our newsletter, and we'll actually immediately get you this information. So we have like posters on 5G and listing, kind of answering your question about the health effects that have been found and some of the problems, what parents need to know about safe technology.
I've blown these up, by the way, for class. You can do it in your
Yeah.
neighborhood, with your community, with your families. You don't have to just have small things.
thank you.
Go to Kinko, you blow this up, it costs nothing. I present it to hundreds of people sometimes.
Yeah, and we have this one in regular, and then we also have it so that you can actually, you can print it out in large. We have our graphics person to make them so that everyone can have this, and when people around the country give talks, they have this blown up, on the table, like you're doing. We also have this one on climate change and 5G, looking at energy efficiency, and on the back of this, we actually have a lot more materials, but it's protect yourself, different ways you can reduce exposure. So you can learn how to reduce exposure to the wireless devices and how to use safer technology.
And while
as
you're
well.
so passionate correctly about children, children's skull is not formed. So they are much, 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 much more susceptible to this. Dr. Cousens, in March, who should they get a hold of for this form that you can reject both cell towers as well as 5G,
And
as
smart
well
meters.
as smart meters?
So it's going to be up on drcousens.com.
drcousens.com.
And the documents will be up in a very clear way. And again, you don't need a lawyer to do this. You can make your actions yourself, and it goes directly to the corporations. And it's pretty undefeatable.
Yeah. And how did they get a hold of you, your organization?
The book, radiationnation.com?
Radiationnationbook.com.
Yep.
Once again, radiationnation.com.
Radiationnationbook.com.
Anyone that's sitting there and
Radiation Nation Book.
yeah, radiationnationbook.com. Anyone that's sitting there listening to this tonight and you're not provoked to save yourself, I know we're all sick, I know we're all weak, I know you've been zapped by cell phones and computers, and you're sitting in front of a computer 8 hours a day, but awaken, awaken. This is one of the many, many things that you're being assaulted with